welcome to this edition of the Private Practice Show. I am so excited to be joined tonight by Elizabeth Dougherty, who is a private practitioner in Manhattan who has a really cool niche for her private practice that not only is she using to help her clients, but she's now helping other speech pathologists in private practice learn how to use this niche for their own practices. So I cannot wait to have Elizabeth on and have her share with all of you what she's doing for her private practice and how you can even actually use it for your private practice. So I'm going to bring Elizabeth on right now. And she just recently changed her handle. So please make sure that you are following Elizabeth so that you can learn all of the amazing ways that you can add Orton-Gillingham to your practice. Hey, Elizabeth,
Hey,
how's it going?
good. So happy to be here. Hey, everyone.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for being on. I have loved watching you on Instagram the last couple of months, and I feel like your page is kind of blowing up in this really cool way. And so I was like, I have to have her on and hear a little bit more about your practice, but then obviously to what you're doing to expand your business. So can you introduce yourself to everyone who's listening and watching?
Sure. Hi, I'm Elizabeth. I'm a speech language pathologist, and I'm also a reading specialist. And like you gave me a great introduction. I own a private practice here in Manhattan, and I'm also a doctoral student. I'm working towards getting my doctorate, and I'm focusing on the relationship between speech language and reading. So I'm really deep into my niche of speech pathology and supporting students in reading.
Oh, and what an important niche, right? Like there are so many people who are, kids and I mean adults too, who have a
Mhm.
hard time with reading, right? And I feel, I mean, you can tell me if this is correct or not, but it feels like a bigger problem since COVID. Is that accurate?
Yes and no. So there's totally like the COVID slide and that regression. Students missed out on really important years of school. Like every year of school is important. So whether you're in kindergarten or 11th grade, if you missed out on learning, you missed out on learning. But what COVID kind of brought to light, especially when the classrooms were opened up over Zoom and parents and everyone else was finally able to listen in, was that not all of their reading instruction was the most high quality. And so there is that COVID gap, but then there's also right now just a lot of interest in, overall as a nation, our students aren't reading very well, which is kind of surprising for such a well-developed nation. So there's now just more of a focus like in the media and in politics on raising student achievement in reading, which makes it a great time to be a speech pathologist who is focused on reading because, that's where the money and the attention is going right now.
Yeah, thank you. And you know what? I actually did listen to that whole thing on NPR about this. And I know that even at my own children's school, I live in Newton, Massachusetts, and my kids go to the public schools here. And people they changed the reading curriculum, and anyway, it was this whole thing. So yes, all of that. So I definitely want to talk about what you're doing with reading specifically in your practice and everything. But before we get to that, can you please share with our listeners slash viewers, how did you get started in private practice?
I got started in private practice, like just I needed money to get by. So, I live in New York City. It's not really cheap here, but they pay teachers and SLPs like, I don't know where they think we live, right? So I was working on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, and I was just not making enough money to live where I worked, which is just horrible. And so I just started, putting my name out there and going onto forums and whatnot online, like, hey, I'm an SLP. I'm a CF, so I wasn't even doing private speech therapy. Like, I just need to just kind of like get some extra hours in, get like a little bit of extra money just to kind of get by. Um, and from there, it really grew. I started to feel more confident in my practice, grow my network, and because I was working in the schools, I started to niche down into reading, and that's when I think my practice really took off.
Awesome. So it sounds like then you started your private practice obviously on the side of your
Mhm.
job in the
Yep.
schools. And also, thank you for saying that you started your business to make some extra money, right? I mean, I did the same thing. And I know because I live in Boston, which is also an
Yeah,
expensive place to live.
you-
And I feel like not enough people kind of talk about that. So I just want to normalize that it is completely okay for people to use the skills that they have that we all paid a boatload for in graduate school in order to make money for ourselves and our families while helping the clients who totally need our help.
I couldn't agree more. And it's really about reframing how you think of it. I think that we're, as speech pathologists, we tend to feel because we want to help people and put others before ourselves. And that's super noble. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be getting compensated for the support we're providing. We have master's degrees, we've done our CFE, we're really specialized in experience. And so there's nothing wrong with being paid appropriately while also helping people. And it is a mindset shift to get there, but it's important to get there. We've got to be compensated for the work that we're
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah, totally. And so thank you for being another person who's trying to flip the script
Mm-hmm.
on that and give people, permission to again to earn money with the skills that they have. And people aren't out there doing crazy stuff with their money, right? They're trying to afford their apartments. They're trying to be able to feed their families, right? And stuff like that. So yeah, people still have really good hearts and it's okay to be able to earn more.
Totally.
So you started this private practice on the side of your job. When was this?
Oh, 2012, 2012, 2013.
Okay, great. And then what happened next?
Um, so yeah, like I was saying, it just kind of started to take off. I grew a network of word of mouth referrals. Here in New York, there's lots of speech pathologists because there's lots of schools, lots of kids. Like there's, it's really dense here. There's a lot of people. And so just as you start talking to people and I'm at this school and you're at that school and I know a student and you know a student, okay, let's kind of refer to each other. And what really helped my practice take off was when I started to get in touch with the students I was seeing with their schools. And I maybe would have contact with a teacher at their school or a learning specialist. And that really helped me kind of grow my network. So I would be working with a student who, another SLP friend passed along, and I would get in touch with the school. And when I would talk to the school, they would kind of say, like, oh, this was so nice talking to you. Do you mind if we share your name to another family? And so I would always say yes. And then eventually I started kind of at the end of a conversation with the school, kind of like pitching myself at the end, like growing more confident and really seeing that this is how I can get referrals is being connected with the schools themselves. And I would always kind of end a conversation with, and by the way, I'm accepting more students. And then eventually I grew so confident with that that I started cold calling schools. I just started reaching out to schools and I needed more students on my caseload. I felt like I was dipping. Okay, let me send an email. Summer is coming up. I mean, this is a great time, right? Summer is coming up. I'm going to reach out to all of these schools in my area and just let them know who I am and what I do, and feel free to pass along my contact. 99% of the time, I wouldn't even get so much as a reply. Sometimes I would get a reply, but more often than not, maybe a few weeks later, I would just get an email from a random parent who's like, so and so at this school shared your info. So I'm like, oh, so they did read the email. And that having the connections with the schools that really helped my practice take off.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I call like planting seeds, right? I think that we're so used to like in some things that we do as speech pathologists having like a one-to-one like think of the therapy we do, right? It's like we present something, a child reacts to it and it's like this kind of one-to-one ratio of like I do something, someone does something else, right? But when it comes to marketing, like that's not really how it works, right? Like sometimes you might like get a referral right away, but other times it may be a couple weeks, months, it could be nothing at all, it could be whatever. But like if you don't start telling people about your services, about your practice, like I say this all the time, if people don't know about you, they can't hire you. So good for you for again seeing a need and then having that confidence increase where you're like, you know what? I know that there are kids out here who need my help. I might as well put myself out there because if I don't, these kids probably aren't going to get anything.
And that's exactly what would happen. And the schools that I was contacting with were schools that did not have SLPs on site. So I worked in a public school when my practice started, and so I was in those schools. But I contacted private and independent schools that didn't have an SLP. So I knew that there's got to be some kids there that need speech support, and there's nobody else there providing it. Why couldn't it be me?
Yeah. I love it. I love everything about that. So you started like, kind of on the side and then seeing these kids and you started growing it with that. Are you now full time in your
I'm
private practice?
now full time in my private, as full time as I can be in anything. I'm a
Yeah.
parent, I'm a doctoral student, I'm full time in my practice. I take students in my practice 3 days a week. Before my daughter was born, I was full time, 5 days a week. I even had Saturday clients, but I've tried to find more balance between parenthood and private practice work, which has been great to have the option to have that flexibility.
Yeah. I mean, people like love, I feel like these days to talk about seasons of life, right? And I think that that's one of the things that's so great about private practice is that it can work for different seasons of life, right? I used to do so much more before I had kids, right? Then all of a sudden the kids come along, you're like, actually, now I want a little bit more balance. I want to spend more time with them. And then when they start going to school, then you could ramp up again if you wanted to, but you might not want to, but you can make that decision when the
And
time comes.
I love being in private practice and having that option because sometimes, when I finished my master's, I wanted to work in a school for a lot of reasons, but something that was really appealing was this idea of like a teacher's schedule and summer is off and you get all these breaks, and you're done at 3 o'clock. And the reality is it's not like that. The school day ends at 3, but you're lesson planning and doing notes, till the end of the day. And the summer's off and the breaks are kind of a trade-off for not really making a lot of money and not having control over when you want your break to be. Like, well, what if I wanted my winter off, let's just say. And so I love in private practice having that ability to say, this is when I want to work and I'm going to work a lot. Like Mondays, I am back to back to back all day. But Fridays, I don't see any students. And it's like I'm still kind of in the end, probably doing the same amount of work, but controlling when that work happens. I get to make the
Yeah.
choice.
And I'm assuming making more money
Yeah.
too.
Oh, well, yes, definitely.
Yeah, right. Right. So and I say this all the time, I say, you have an opportunity to make more and work less. And I think some percentage of people think I'm somehow making that up, like, which I'm not, right? It's not magic, it's just math.
1,000%. And something I would even add on top of that is to, when eventually you get to have the power to choose the students and families you work with. When we're in the schools, we work with everybody and we provide the supports to everybody as we should. But you have those sticky situations or those kids that like, I'm really into reading and literacy and I would have motor speech students on my caseload. And I sometimes would feel like really bad. Like I'm not an expert in this and I don't know how to help these kids the best. And I love being in private practice because I get to just focus on the kids where I know I can have the best and biggest impact and work less and make more. And so it's just awesome.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's like it's like a choose your own adventure book, right? You're like, I want to work these days. I want to work these hours. You match the salary that you want to the rate that you want to charge and everything, and then you just kind of make it happen. And I would assume as someone, I love talking to people who live in Manhattan too about like how they kind of do their day and stuff. Are you seeing everyone like in person? Are you going to people's homes? Are you going to their schools? Any teletherapy? Like, how are you actually seeing your clients?
I'm seeing them in all different ways. So I am doing teletherapy with, children in different areas. And I do have teletherapy students who live in the area, but the parents prefer it to be remote. It's easier for their scheduling. It allows for like sometimes later at night or sometimes a Saturday morning. So I have students in New York, Manhattan, and Brooklyn who I do see remote, which is interesting. I have some who come to me, to my apartment, my small little workspace, but that's what works for those families. I'm near a bus drop off for like a yellow school bus drop off for some of the schools. So the students come off the bus and come to me, and then I travel to them as well. And traveling in New York is walking, is subway riding. Um, Taxis and Ubers are a little bit out of the SLP budget, but just kind of traveling all around the city, which is really fun. Today I was on the Upper East Side and I had a little bit of time between students. So I ate my lunch in Central Park, which is just like makes things a million times better because the weather was so nice. So I'm all over. I'm a little bit of everything.
Well, and I love again that freedom, right? Like this is, what I say all the time are Jenna's favorite F words. I don't know if you've heard me say this or listeners or viewer if you've heard me say this, but the reasons why people choose private practice are freedom, flexibility, fulfillment, and finances. And you have like hit on all of those things tonight, right? Like the freedom to have lunch in Central Park, right? How great is that? Like the fulfillment of being able to work with your ideal clients, right? The financial element to this whole thing. Like that's why I'm such a big believer in private practice and why it just works out so well for so many people. So how did you get into like specifically also this whole Orton-Gillingham course that you have? Because I'm fascinated by this and I think it's awesome.
Thank you. So when I was working in the schools, I noticed I was in a gen ed school and we had a special education population within our general education setting. And so like, fresh out of graduate school, I'm like, okay, my students, my goal for them, not their goal, but my goal is I'm going to help them move out of their, special education classroom and go into the gen ed classroom right next door. Like I'm going to get them there. And many of my students made progress in speech, but I just noticed that in schools, it felt like the only progress that ever really mattered, and this is in elementary schools, was progress in reading. And so it was like, oh, they met this goal in speech and they did this in OT and they did this in counseling, but they're not reading at grade level. So, we're not going to get rid of the IEP and whatnot. So that just kind of sparked my interest in reading. And I had taken a course in reading in my graduate program, but I don't think I learned anything. I can't even remember. I tried to think all the time, like, what did we even talk about? So I just kind of went on a mission to get myself trained. And I eventually winded up, I did a lot of other reading supports. I ended up getting a second master's in education and then eventually found Orton-Gillingham and got trained in Orton-Gillingham. And that was when the light bulb really went off. Like, this is so perfect for SLPs because it's language-based, structured, and systematic approach to teaching reading and spelling. It works great in a one-to-one setting or a small group setting. And it's perfect for our students who have trouble with speech sounds or, language production. It really meets them where they're at. I saw a lot of success with my students. My private practice got really successful when I brought reading in. And I got to the point where I had a wait list. And I got to the point where I was thinking about potentially hiring someone to work with me. And I couldn't find anybody who had the training that I had. Like, there aren't a lot of speech pathologists who also do Orton-Gillingham and who also do reading at the level that I was doing it. And so I'm like, well, that can't be good because all of our kids need reading. There's a huge overlap between speech language needs and reading disability, and that we know from the literature. Like, it's real. So our kids are struggling with reading. Asha says we can help them with reading, but we don't have a lot of SLPs who can go deep enough with reading to really provide the support. And so I ended up just saying, like, all right, well, then I'm going to make a training and I'm going to get everyone there and help get those kids where they need to be and get those SLPs. I found I was getting more clients, I was getting more referrals. I was able to raise my rates because the progress they were making in my sessions was directly matching the classroom. And so parents are like, oh, this is good. Of course, I'll pay you a little bit more, you know? And so I want other SLPs to be able to do that too. If reading is where they want to niche down, I want to give them that support, that knowledge.
Yeah, totally. Well, again, it's like this is the thing that I really like about just about private practice in general is if you can spot a need in your community, whatever it is, right? Maybe it's reading, maybe it's feeding, maybe it's fluency. I can't rhyme anymore, but anyway, so it's like if you spot a need and you can fill it, then that's awesome. And then if you spot a need and not only can you fill it, but you can help other people fill it, then that is really like where your ability to impact even more people than you can do in your own life, like through your own practice, right? This is exactly what I've done, right? There's only so many people that I could help through my own practice, that when I started helping people start and grow their own practices, my ability to impact more people just like expanded exponentially, right? And that's exactly what you're doing, which is why I think this is so helpful, to the students that you're serving, to the peers that you're now, helping train this, and then to you and your family and your finances too.
Absolutely. And I hosted an event over Zoom last night for everyone who was in my class. And my numbers are really modest compared to yours. But um, seeing the community of SLPs, and they were talking about, we had one person who had taken my course and was talking about how she was running a reading boot camp in her practice this summer. And her partner were advertising this boot camp, and they were starting to get parents sign up, and they were new families and new referrals, and they were like, maybe this is going to grow, maybe it won't just be in the summer. And just seeing how like you just said, that impact is like, wow, and they're in another part of the world that, I would never be able to teach any of those students, but now they can. And it's so amazing to see. And to bring it back to what we talked about at the beginning, to have that financial piece just be behind it as well makes it all the sweeter.
Yeah, totally, totally. I mean, it truly is a win-win for everyone, right? Because again, you're filling the void for these families, you're filling a void for the clinicians. One of the things that's always been interesting to me about reading is, to me, it kind of fills into like the same kind of category as like AAC and fluency, where people just don't always have the confidence, right? Like whether or not they have the skills, maybe yes, maybe no, but there's this like confidence barrier that comes with like a voice, I would say, is like another thing, right? And so I think that seems to be one of the things that you're also helping people realize, is that they do have like the skills and abilities, they just have to learn how to channel them to this very specific way.
1,000%. There's actually, I'm a doctoral student, so I'm going to cite a little research, but there was a paper that came out earlier this year. I mean, it's only April, so like very hot off the presses research. And it was a self-efficacy questionnaire about speech pathologists' confidence in teaching reading. And surprise, surprise, speech pathologists are not confident in teaching reading, and they're less confident in teaching reading than they are in any other aspect of language. But when you really look at what reading entails, you'll see that, if we're reading language, and most of what's involved in reading is stuff we already know, and we just have to reframe how we're thinking about it. And then I sprinkle in new information as well. But the confidence thing is, I think, the biggest, most important piece is like, we can do this. It's in our scope of practice, and we do have the knowledge. We just don't think that we have the knowledge.
Yeah. Totally. Because again, like when I think back to grad school too, and for people who do or do not know this, like I'm an adult person. Like I'm aphasia, I'm TBI, right? So like reading is not, isn't my thing, right? But like I feel like I sort of, and I went to grad school like embarrassing like 20 years ago, right? And I remember at the time like learning about reading, same thing. I don't know what I learned in that class.
Right.
I don't think it was a lot, right? But I also sort of felt like there was this weird thing that like, oh, but there's also reading
Mhm.
specialists. So like we kind of, stay in your lane over here and just call in like the reading specialist, right? So there seemed to be this like weird thing where it wasn't our scope of practice, but like don't worry about it, like someone else will do it.
Yeah, but if you're in private practice, do you want to be saying, "Oh, no, I can't do that. Go to someone else"? I mean, I've talked to many SLPs who have said, "Yeah, I've lost clients because the parents have decided to shift over to reading support."
Mm.
And I think like, "Ooh, that's such a missed opportunity because you can build reading into your session." And not to say like the parents shouldn't have the option to go wherever they want, but just you as the clinician to be able to say like, well, I can also support that. And here's what I'm going to offer with reading. And maybe that isn't what you're looking for, but to miss out on a client because you don't quite realize that you have the knowledge, that's just terrible.
Yeah. Well, and again, I've been watching your Instagram stories and whatnot. I also perhaps had a misconception that there was like hours and hours, like hundreds of hours of training that you had to do to be able to do Orton-Gillingham. But it seems like that's not the case.
So a big misconception about Orton-Gillingham in general is that it is like owned or copyrighted by somebody, or it's this like, I would compare it to the way a lot of people think about prompt in our field of motor speech. So that is something that somebody has developed and they own it and they copyright it and they certify it. You either are or you aren't prompt certified. And I think that's so cool. Orton-Gillingham was developed in the 1930s. It is just an approach to teaching reading. And it's been around for a while and it's existed in a lot of different iterations. And there are multiple publishing companies and professional education companies who have created their versions of Orton-Gillingham training. And Orton-Gillingham is a lot. There's a lot of information. So it's 30 hours, 60 hours, maybe supervised practicum. I've done a lot of those trainings. And I think that they're fabulous. I would never discourage anybody from doing it if that's the route they want to go. But I found that a lot of the information was repetitive to speech language pathologists. Those trainings are created for teachers who have different preparation. I mean, I went to an Orton-Gillingham training once and they handed me that vowel chart, that like funny trapezoid shape to talk about vowel sound production. I'm like, well, I had this in undergrad. So what I tried to do was say like, you can go that whole route, but you don't have to. And as speech pathologist, what I try to do is just pull out the things that are most important. And I don't go super deep. To go from a 30-hour course to a 3-hour course, there are some stuff that we skip over. But I hope what I can do is empower SLPs to realize the knowledge that they have in reading, to get started bringing some of that into their sessions. Maybe it's just bringing letter sounds. Maybe it's just some comprehension work. Maybe you're not doing full Orton-Gillingham 5 days a week, but just to have that knowledge and, like we said, feel more confident is really my goal.
Yeah, totally. And again, like you're simplifying it, right? Like you're taking like you're distilling it, and then what's the other word I was trying to think of? It's like you're curating the information, right?
Oh, I
To
love
be yeah, how fancy is that, right? You're curating the information. But like in a lot of ways too, like that's what I'm doing about private practice, right? Like so many people are like, well, I guess I better go get an MBA, right? Or like not at all to discourage people, from going on and getting their doctorate, but I've had some people be like, well, let me go get my doctorate first and then I'll start my practice. And I'm like, if you want to do that, that's totally fine. But like, you don't need to do that to
exactly.
start your practice, right? So very similarly, where you're like, you can take the 30 or 60-hour Orton-Gillingham course, or you could take this 3-hour course, which is distilled and is exactly the information that you need to use this information tomorrow.
Exactly. Exactly. We're doing the same thing, and I love it.
I love that. So tell people more about like where they can learn about you, where they can learn about your program. And then following up on that, like can people do your program and then literally add this to their private practice like quickly?
Very quickly. So you can find me on Instagram at Elizabeth_reading SLP. I am the reading speech pathologist. And you can enroll in my course right through my Instagram, or you can message me. I host brainstorms twice a week, Zoom sessions. Come on, ask me questions. Let's talk more about what your goals are, and if this course will meet them. So I love talking to SLP. So sign up and come to a session. Um, and the course itself is under 3 hours. So it is a short course. And it's self-paced, so you can do it as quickly or slowly as you want. But if you enrolled tonight, it's 8:30 on the East Coast, you'd be done before midnight, and you would be ready to go tomorrow. Because not only do I give you the knowledge in the course, but I give you a huge implementation kit of materials, lesson plans, worksheets, assessment, progress monitoring tools, supplemental activities, sound symbol cards, special dictation paper for students. Like, all you'll have to do is print and go. So you will be ready tomorrow. And not only that, but I have seen and I've been sharing on Instagram a lot of SLPs have started marketing their private practice after taking the course as providing Orton-Gillingham support and as providing reading support, and they'll post on Instagram. This is something we offer now. They'll share it in their community. But that to me has been like something I didn't expect when I created the course. I'm like, I just want to get the knowledge, but seeing how speech pathologists are bringing it into their practice and getting more clients or new clients, reaching new areas, new connections, like the SLP who is having this summer course, like just the way it's been so transformative for their private practice, it's been amazing to watch and really, really cool to see.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, it's just so great too when things are like so implementable like so quickly, right? Like I think that that's great because like people want to be able to implement, right? And again, like everyone, think back to graduate school, how much time that took and how much of that information are we actually using on a daily basis, right? Like Elizabeth and I can't even remember what we learned in the course that was about reading, right? And like
No.
she actually cares about reading deeply, right? And so like to be able to just like cut out the fluff, cut to the chase, like this is what you need to know, this is how to implement. Like I applaud you, and I think that we need more people doing this. And I also just want to give you one other compliment, which is that I love it when SLPs support other SLPs, right? Like if we can create products, resources, trainings, workshops, because like we're not necessarily getting this stuff like, well, we didn't, a lot of it we didn't get in grad school, period, or we don't remember it, or it wasn't very good or whatever
Right.
else, right? Like, or like we're not necessarily getting it from asha or
No,
wanting to do the 60-hour course or whatever else, right? And so like again, I'm just like so loving when SLPs are creating products and resources for SLPs so that we can just level up this profession together.
thank you. And I would say the same for you, because we did not get a drip. I don't know one graduate program in the country that teaches how to manage, how to start and manage a private practice. It is just not something that's talked about, and which is so crazy because the opportunity is there. And I think you are the only person doing what you're doing you're having such a tremendous impact. I love watching what's going on. It is amazing to get speech pathologists empowered to take control of their career, pick their schedules, make more money, and just get more satisfaction. You're able to give SLPs what we came into the field for, is that like awesome feeling of helping kids and feeling really good. And private practice is the way to go to get that feeling back.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for being on. Thank you for sharing your story. Can you tell everyone one more time where they can learn about you?
Sure. You can visit me on Instagram at Elizabeth_reading SLP.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. Everyone, give Elizabeth a follow, send her a DM, go to one of her brainstorm sessions, sign up for a course. Like, just go out there, and if reading is your thing, or if maybe you've been thinking about doing it, but it's felt intimidating, like, go do this and go help more kids.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
All right, take care.
Bye.